Have you ever wondered what really makes a scientific study succeed or fail? You might be surprised to learn that it happens long before any data is ever collected. That's what we're jumping into today with Chapter 4 of Design and Clinical Research. And it's not about heavy statistics. It's about something far more foundational, the mindset behind measurement.
You know, the main idea in this chapter is really powerful. It says that measurement isn't just one step you take along the way. Nope. It's more like the architectural blueprint for the entire study. The choices you make right at the beginning, they basically decide the integrity and the meaning of whatever you find later on. It really is all about starting with the right frame of mind.
So what is this mindset? Well, it's really about being obsessed with one question. How well do the things we're measuring actually represent the real-world stuff we're trying to understand?
And this gets to the core challenge of, all research, right? You start with these big, abstract questions about things like pain or recovery or risk. The real art of measurement is figuring out how to translate that big idea into concrete numbers you can actually analyze, and to do it without losing the meaning of what you started with. Every little decision you make in that translation, it directly affects how truthful your final conclusions can be.
Okay, so to build that bridge from the abstract to the concrete, the chapter brings up two really fundamental qualities you need in any good measurement. Now, they might sound kind of similar, but trust me, they tackle very different types of problems.
Let's break this down a bit. On one hand, you've got precision. This is all about consistency. Like, if you measure the same thing over and over, do you keep getting the same answer? That's precision. It's about getting rid of random error. Then you have accuracy. This is about truthfulness. Is your measurement actually hitting the correct, true value? This is about avoiding systematic error or bias. And the tricky part is, you can totally have one without the other. The best way to picture this is with a classic analogy.
So, picture yourself throwing darts at a dartboard. In this first case, your darts are landing all over the place. They're scattered everywhere, and they're not even close to the bullseye. This is pretty much the worst-case scenario. Your measurements are neither consistent nor correct, which means the data is, well, it's basically useless.
All right, now imagine your darts are all clumped together in a tight little group. Hey, that's great precision. But here's the problem. That whole cluster is way off in the corner of the board, nowhere near the center. So your measurements are super consistent, but they are consistently wrong. And this might actually be the most dangerous situation of all, because it gives you this very powerful but totally false sense of certainty.
Okay, in this next one, the darts are scattered all over again, so any single throw is pretty unreliable. But if you were to average out the location of all the darts, you'd find the center of the group is right on the bullseye. In research, this means your data is correct on average, but it's got so much random noise, so much static, that it's really hard to find a clear signal in there.
And then we get to the ideal, what everyone's aiming for. The measurements are all tightly clustered, and they're smack dab in the middle of the bullseye. They are both reproducible and correct. This right here is the foundation of trustworthy data. It's the gold standard.
But look, being precise and accurate, that's only part of the story. The chapter then kind of zooms out and asks us to think about a deeper, maybe even more philosophical question about the measurement itself.
And that brings us to a really critical question. What if you have the most precise, most accurate dart-throwing arm in the world, but you've aimed it at the wrong target altogether? This is where we bump into this huge concept called validity.
Let's make this super concrete for a second. Imagine you're using a heart rate monitor to measure academic stress. Now, that monitor can give you incredibly precise and accurate data on beats per minute, no doubt. But is heart rate a valid way to measure something as complex as academic stress? I mean, stress is a whole psychological state. Sure, heart rate might be a piece of that puzzle, but it's also affected by the coffee you just drank or if you just ran up the stairs. An accurate measurement of the wrong thing isn't just unhelpful. It can lead you to some seriously flawed conclusions. So you can think of validity as this qualitative check. It's asking a really simple but profound question. Does this measurement really capture the heart of what I'm trying to study? And a lot of the time, there isn't some perfect gold standard to compare your measurement to. So researchers have to build a case for validity, making sure their measurement makes sense and lines up with what we already know from scientific theory. So, with all these potential pitfalls, random error, bias, aiming at the wrong target, how do researchers actually protect their data? Well, the chapter lays out some core principles for making sure your data is as strong and trustworthy as possible. One big theme is dealing with the human element. This means things like creating a super detailed operations manual so that every single person measures things the exact same way. It means training your observers so they're all consistent. And, this is a big one, it can mean using blinding, so an observer's own beliefs about the study can't unconsciously influence what they're measuring.
Another area of focus is on the instruments you're using. This could mean tweaking questionnaires to make them crystal clear, or even automating measurements to completely remove human error from the picture. And of course, it means regularly calibrating your equipment against a gold standard to make sure it stays accurate.
Now, these aren't just little technical details to check off a list. The chapter really hammers home that all this careful, early planning is exactly what gives a study its meaning and its credibility in the end.
Because a mistake in measurement isn't something you can just fix later with some fancy statistics. No, it's more like a crack in the foundation of a building. It can undermine the whole structure and could lead you to totally wrong conclusions, not to mention wasting a ton of time, money, and the trust of your participants.
There's a great little quote from the text that sums this up perfectly. It says, "The validity of a study depends on how well the variables represent the phenomena of interest." I mean, think about that. The strength of your entire study really just comes down to how well your measurements actually mirror reality.
So really, designing your measurements thoughtfully, that's the process that turns raw data into something meaningful. It's what makes sure the numbers you end up with aren't just, well, numbers, but a genuine, trustworthy reflection of the real world.
Ultimately, this chapter isn't really a checklist of how-to steps. It's more of a guide to a way of thinking. It gets a researcher ready to go into their work with a real appreciation for just how fragile data can be. It gives them the tools to build their study on a foundation that's so solid that every single step that comes after, the analysis, the interpretation, the conclusions, is just that much more reliable.
You see, in the end, the architecture of our measurements, that determines the strength of the knowledge we build.